In high school, I had a best friend. That's not unusual. What is, though, was that I had a favorite friend, where my best friend Tom was someone I could confide in and have inside jokes with. My favorite friend, Max, was just endearing to me and my friend group. Every day at break, he would try the same bit, starting a story with, "So there I was," in the hopes that whoever he saddled up to forgot he was holding his bag of hot Cheetos next to their ear waiting to pop it. He also did something I started doing, which was when he left, he'd turn his body to us and wave with both hands. Max had a micropenis, or so rumor had it. The thing about that rumor, though, was that it was started by Max himself. He did this to hide the fact that he was actually packing. Max thought that a rumor about a micropenis would lead to him being left alone versus people knowing about his lap hog. Max was quite the character, and I remember him fondly, and I remember him as my favorite friend. My other high school chums held a similar sentiment. It's important to make this distinction clear between these superlatives. Now, I have a favorite sport with a favorite team with a favorite player. Now, my favorite player is not the best player I've ever seen play for my favorite team. The same goes for my favorite team. They might not be the best, but they are still my favorite. When making small talk with new acquaintances, I usually get asked why baseball is my favorite sport. It's a reasonable question. The simple answer is, well, my dad likes baseball. He likes the Dodgers. So, as a kid, I'd go to a lot of games, and seeing as I looked up to my dad, I took on the same fandom. Heck, my sister and I joke that our grandfather moved to Los Angeles from Brooklyn when the Dodgers moved. Now, there is a more complicated answer. That answer has nothing to do with my favorite player, nor does it have to do with the best Dodger I've ever seen. It most certainly doesn't have to do with the best team I've ever seen either. It does, however, have to do with the most important player to me. Now, I originally wrote a version of the script 7 years ago. I had every intention of filming it around that time as well. Since then, things have changed. I have certainly changed. The original version was loaded with existential dread. Now, most of it has been cut. I'm not as existentially miserable as I was 7 years ago. I'm not dwelling on the uselessness of one's existence, given how, on a large scale, one ultimately doesn't matter. I've learned to just try my best, to enjoy the ride I am on. Enjoy the present. It's hard, given how miserable the world is, but I try. When the Dodgers won in 2020, the worst year ever, it was one of the few good things that happened that year. When they won, I cried. Now, it wasn't the first time I had cried that year, though it was the second time I cried out of happiness. I called my dad immediately. My dad is the reason I care about the sport and the team in the first place. My dad, who just earlier that year finally got his kidney replaced, but was in the hospital at the worst time to be in one. When he FaceTimed me when he was discharged, I cried because of how relieved I was to see him back home. When the Dodgers won in 2020, I thought about my late uncle and maternal grandfather who didn't get to see this. The latter who saw the 2017 team, but not the scandal that followed. This is a long way of saying how much baseball means to me. It's also a reminder that I've changed. I'm a very different Ted in my 30s than I was in my 20s. The main reason I'm even deciding to do this video is because of one simple fact. When I think back on why I love baseball, one player continues to stick out. That player and his Dodger career is forever burned in my brain. During the 2010-2011 offseason, the Dodgers' then general manager was Ned Colletti. He was a former San Francisco Giant exec until he joined the Dodgers in 2005. Colletti had a tendency to sign former Giants players in free agency. Sometimes it'd work, like with second baseman Jeff Kent. Oftentimes they'd be disasters, like with pitcher Jason Schmidt. During this offseason, Ned Colletti struck again, signing former Giant Juan Uribe to a 3-year deal. Uribe was a good, everyday player that could swing a big stick while playing Gold Glove level defense in the infield. His 2011 campaign was something else. Juan Uribe would post his worst season by BWAR and would be measured as just league average by FWAR in only 77 games. Now, I just realized I'm describing him as league average with a 0 F4, I'm pretty sure that just means he's actually replacement level, like he's worse than average. So he was worse than an average player. Uribe lost his starting job to Casey Blake on his last legs in July. Mike Petriello, now of MLB.com, had a Dodger-focused blog that I read pretty religiously at that time. Each offseason, he would do player reviews. He gave Uribe an F. Not to be outdone, though, Uribe was once again penciled in as the starting third baseman for the 2012 season. Uribe proceeded to be even worse in fewer games. He was so bad in 66 games that the Dodgers turned to Luis Cruz, who was suddenly a viable everyday player. His terrible 2 seasons came to a boiling point on Friday, June 29th, 2012. R.A. Dickey and the Mets were in town. Dickey was in the middle of his Cy Young season and probably would have thrown a no-hitter if not for a third-inning single by pitcher Aaron Harang. I happened to be at this game, and my friend lamented,
"If they were just going to lose, I would have liked to have seen a no-hitter."
In the 6th inning, Uribe was inserted into the game, playing third base. The next half inning, he came up to bat and was loudly booed by the home crowd.
Batting next, third baseman, number 5, Juan Uribe.
Uribe proceeded to strike out and was once again promptly booed. Uribe's 2012 was so bad that Mike Petriello gave Uribe the grade of boo. My friend's brother said,
"He's probably going to go home and kill himself."
It was probably the lowest he felt in his career. And man, we've all been there. Felt bad, felt helpless, and living with no meaning. The rub of it is that in the grand scheme of things, much like everything in life, it is cosmically insignificant. Our existence is just filled with biding our time. Even if we fixed everything, eventually the sun dies, and in turn, we do, erasing anything and everything we've ever done. The first 2 years of Juan Uribe's Dodger tenure reminds us of those facts. It was a reminder of life and one's own mortality. Life is a slog, and we all get the same ending. It's a miserable, unfun existence. So we distract ourselves, push away the thoughts that we are just watching everyone we love grow older and die. Or how many relationships are you waking up hoping you don't realize you don't love this person as much as you thought you did? Brother, life sucks. It's not fun. So we need distractions. Sometimes we care about those distractions too much. Why should I care if a guy is dog shit on my favorite team? Ultimately, it doesn't fundamentally change my life, yet I care. Baseball is so much more than just a distraction. There is something cathartic about watching baseball. There is something about it that parallels life perfectly. It's October 7th, 2013. The Dodgers lead the NLDS with a 2-1 lead over the Atlanta Braves. The Dodgers are trailing 2-3 heading into the 8th inning. After a leadoff double, Juan Uribe approaches the plate. Juan Uribe squares to bunt. Now, with everything I've told you about Juan Uribe's Dodger tenure, we can sorta follow this logic. Dodgers manager Don Mattingly inserted Juan Uribe as a pinch hitter, expecting to bring in a reliever the next inning. Or, with Uribe's woes at the plate, having him give himself up to get the runner over is better than most other outcomes. Here's the thing though. Having Uribe attempt to hit a sacrifice bunt in 2013 is a bad decision. Life is funny. It isn't linear, nor does it ever make sense. Ahead of the 2013 season, the Dodgers, with a new ownership group, signed the #1 free agent pitcher Zack Greinke. Now, I could do a whole video about why Zack Greinke rules, but you can literally read so many other things about him that you kind of get the gist about why he rules. His second start was against the Padres in San Diego. In the 6th inning, with a 2-1 lead, Greinke plunked Carlos Quentin. Quentin took exception to it, it's a long story, and charged the mound. Upon contact, Greinke broke his collarbone, and he knew it. Fast forward with the game tied, and with the offense having stalled since a first-inning home run, Juan Uribe was asked to pinch hit in the 8th inning. Starting the season, Uribe wasn't going to factor into a big role on the team, the perception being he was an unplayable, untradeable contract. This game is still early on in the season, so stats haven't stabilized yet. Looking at the numbers, Uribe was just as bad as he was the year before, riding an abysmal 111 average, though his replacement, Luis Cruz, wasn't doing much better with a 115 average. Luis Cruz was in the middle of turning back into a pumpkin that excelled at hitting pop flies to the shortstop. So here is Uribe, asked to get something going when he hasn't been going for 2 years, after the Dodgers just lost their big free agent signing for who knows how long. Something that pops out when you see Uribe swing is that he swings hard, always. You could describe it as him swinging out of his shoes. Also, when he makes contact, he lets go of his bat like he's doing jazz hands. It's aesthetically pleasing if he wasn't so dog shit at baseball. There is a rather humorous gif from a spring training game where he swung so hard it looked like he was just going to screw himself into the ground before ultimately crumpling to said ground. This at-bat is more of the same. First pitch, swing and miss. One of the hardest swings I've ever seen in my life. Next pitch was a meatball, and Uribe didn't miss. He hit a rocket to the left field bleachers to break the tie. That was Uribe's second hit of the season. He only had 2 hits in all of April. Both were homers. By May, Luis Cruz was unplayable, and Juan Uribe essentially became the everyday third baseman simply because he was the only option. When I tell you that Juan Uribe had a good season would be an understatement. By B-War standards, he'd have his second most productive season at this time, and by F-War, it was his second most productive season. He had a good offensive season with great defense. On September 9th, Uribe would have a 3-homer game. He had 5 that month. He hit 6 in his first 2 seasons. Mike Petriello tweeted, "I'm not really prepared for Juan Uribe's year in review. Normal human letter grades don't seem to apply." Life is full of highs and lows. Sometimes the lows stick around a lot longer than the highs. So much so you won't know when you'll get yourself out of there. Honestly, I don't think fans really recognized how good a season Uribe was having, just because the valley we had been living in with him for 2 years was so deep and so long. He got a curtain call that September 9th game, but it was more for what he did that day, not for the season. Slowly, though, Uribe went from the guy nobody wanted on the team to being affectionately called Uribe. Dodger fans loved watching the Juan Uribe Hyunjin Ryu friendship blossom, one that seems impossible, one that in normal circumstances probably never happens. A friendship where 2 people who do not speak a common language, but oftentimes they seemed connected at the hip, though nobody was prepared for the high that was to come. I vividly remember watching Game 4 of the 2013 NLDS. I was in my dorm room with the Dodgers trailing 3-2 in the 8th inning. A runner on second, Uribe comes up to the plate. I then started screaming and shouting in annoyance. This time, it wasn't because Juan Uribe was up to bat. He was the big reason they had won the night before with a huge game at the plate. I was screaming over the decision Don Mattingly came to. The first pitch, Juan Uribe squares up to bunt. A baffling decision, not because Mattingly was playing for the tie at home, but because a bunt is a free out when they are at a premium in the playoffs. And it wasn't because Uribe had a great season at the plate, it was because a manager was asking a player to do something he cannot do. Uribe can't bunt. It's not who he is as a player. I was furious. Uribe foul bunted the first 2 pitches, putting himself in a dog shit situation. Uribe worked the count back to even somehow. On the 2-2 pitch, the unthinkable happens.
That ball is drilled to left. Back toward that wall and gone. And the Dodgers lead.
After Juan Uribe couldn't do what he has never done in his career, a guy who was booed by his team's fans for 2 years and was unplayable for that same span, hit a home run that is burned into my memory. It was bedlam in Dodger Stadium. At that point, it was the loudest I've ever heard the stadium. My dad was at the game and confirmed as much, though he had been at the game he had been to Dodger Stadium when it was louder than that, but very similar circumstances. Juan Uribe went from a guy who was rejected by fans to a folk hero for that same fan base. This more connects to the irrationality that comes with being human. It's why I can have a best friend and a favorite friend. It's why I can connect with a sport, because I watched a player have a Dodger career that was filled with as many ups and downs as a human life. It's why Juan Uribe is important to me. It's why baseball is important to me. It encapsulates what it means to be human because of the extreme highs and lows. It is so unpredictable. The best don't always make the difference. You never know who, where, or how things are going to work out for you. Even with the best odds, it's impossible to know. The path of life is one that you can barely see 3 feet out in front of you. You don't know where you're going. You don't know how dangerous it is. You're just hoping to get to the end in one piece and happy. There just isn't any guarantee you get that. When I watch baseball, I see a reflection of that. That's what keeps drawing me in like a moth to a flame. The highs can be so euphoric, and there are few and far between. The lows can be soul crushing, making you look for answers that you'll never get. Yeah, we can distract ourselves with hobbies, crafts, or just seeing friends, but a pure representation of life that is just as irrational is something I could watch until that ball in the sky goes out. So for that, Juan Uribe, thank you.